The biting wind carried dust across the desolate main street of Seligman, Arizona Territory, as Reid clutched her 6-month-old daughter against her chest, shielding the infant from both the elements and the condemning stares of townsfolk who had once called her neighbor. The church bell tolled 3 times, each ring seeming to announce her shame to the vast, unforgiving desert beyond. It was 1875, and Hannah's life had collapsed like a house of cards. At 22, she found herself standing before the general store with nothing but a small carpet bag containing her meager possessions. Her baby girl Emma wrapped in a threadbare blanket, and the weight of public scorn crushing down upon her shoulders. Pastor Wilkins' final words still echoed in her ears: wickedness must not be permitted to flourish among decent Christian folk, as the town council had unanimously voted for her expulsion. 6 months ago, Hannah had been the schoolteacher, respected and admired. Now she was an outcast, a fallen woman who had given birth without a husband. She refused to name Emma's father, a traveling salesman who had promised marriage before disappearing forever. Her stubborn silence only fueled the rumors and hastened her downfall. "You best be on your way before sundown, Miss Reid," Mr. Thornton, the store owner, said gruffly as he placed a small sack of provisions beside her. His wife had insisted on the charity, though his expression made clear his disapproval. "The stage to Prescott leaves in an hour." Hannah nodded wordlessly. Prescott was 50 miles away, a fresh start perhaps, but with what? Her teaching position was gone, her reputation destroyed. She had family back east, but they had made their feelings about her situation abundantly clear in their last letter. No, she couldn't go back. "I appreciate the provisions, Mr. Thornton," Hannah said, voice steady despite the trembling in her limbs. She had promised herself she wouldn't cry, not in front of these people who had turned on her so quickly. As she gathered her things, a tall figure on horseback appeared at the far end of the street. The sun at his back cast him in shadow, but even from a distance, the broad shoulders and easy posture in the saddle marked him as a man comfortable with the harsh realities of the frontier. Preston Hayes pulled his horse to a stop outside the telegraph office, swinging down from the saddle with the fluid grace of someone who spent more time on horseback than on foot. At 30, he had the weathered look of a man who lived by his wits, and the strength of his hands in a land that forgave no weakness. His cattle ranch, the Cottonwood Creek spread 10 miles outside of town, was modest but growing, the result of 5 years of backbreaking work after he'd left his job as a ranch hand in Texas. He noticed the young woman with the baby immediately. Something in her posture, proud yet defeated, caught his attention. Preston had been gone 2 weeks, driving a small herd to sell in Flagstaff, and clearly things had happened in Seligman during his absence. "That's the school teacher," the telegraph operator, old Bill Matthews, said when he caught Preston's gaze. "Town council voted her out yesterday. Unmarried with a child, you know how it goes." Preston frowned. He'd met Miss Reid briefly at a town social last year before her condition became known. She'd struck him as intelligent and kind, qualities in short supply in these parts. "Where's she headed?" he asked casually, tucking the telegram he'd received into his shirt pocket. Bill shrugged. "Prescott, maybe. Nowhere to go around here. Reverend Wilkins made sure every door's closed to her." Preston nodded thoughtfully, his eyes still on Hannah. He'd never put much stock in the pious hypocrisy that passed for morality in Seligman. A man was judged by his actions in his book, his honesty, his work ethic, his treatment of others. And a woman deserved the same consideration. As Hannah struggled to balance her carpetbag while holding Emma, Preston found himself walking across the street toward her. "Miss Reid," he said, tipping his hat. "Preston Hayes. We met at the Harvest Social last year." Hannah looked up, surprise momentarily replacing the resignation in her eyes. "Mr. Hayes, I remember." Up close, Preston could see the exhaustion etched on her face, yet she maintained a dignity that impressed him. The baby in her arms whimpered softly. "I understand you're leaving town today," he said. "The stage can be mighty uncomfortable with a little one. I'm headed back to my ranch, and I'd be happy to offer you a ride if you're going that direction." Hannah's eyes narrowed with suspicion. Kindness from strangers had become something to question rather than welcome. "That's very generous, Mr. Hayes, but I'm afraid I need to get to Prescott." Preston nodded, understanding her wariness. "Well, if you'll permit me, I'd like to purchase your stage ticket then. It's a small thing." "Why would you do that?" Hannah asked bluntly. "You hardly know me." "I know enough," Preston replied. "I know that this town can be quick to judge and slow to forgive. And I know that traveling alone with an infant isn't easy." He paused. "Besides, my mother raised me and my brothers alone after my father was killed. She taught me that character isn't about circumstances, but how you face them." Hannah studied him, searching for ulterior motives in his steady gaze. Finding none, her shoulders relaxed slightly. "Thank you, Mr. Hayes. That's very kind." As Preston walked with her toward the stage station, whispers followed them. He ignored them with practiced ease, but he noticed how Hannah's back stiffened with each murmured comment. "Don't pay them any mind," he said quietly. "Most folks here wouldn't survive a day outside their comfortable little worlds." Hannah gave him a grateful look but remained silent until they reached the stage station. As the driver loaded her bag, she turned to Preston. "I appreciate your kindness, Mr. Hayes. It's been in short supply lately." He nodded, suddenly reluctant to see her go. There was something about Hannah Reid that stirred protective instincts he hadn't known he possessed. "Miss Reid, if Prescott doesn't work out for you." He hesitated, then continued more firmly. "My ranch has a small cabin, used to be the original homestead before I built the main house. It's not much, but it's sturdy and dry. You'd be welcome to stay there while you get on your feet." Hannah stared at him, momentarily speechless. "Mr. Hayes, you can't possibly mean that. You don't know me." "I'm a decent judge of character," he said simply, "and I've got more space than I need. The offer stands, regardless of what you decide today." The stagecoach driver called for passengers to board. Hannah looked torn, glancing from Preston to the stage and back again. "Prescott's a bigger town," Preston added gently. "Might have more opportunities. But it's also expensive, and people talk there same as here." Hannah bit her lip, then looked down at Emma, who had fallen asleep in her arms. The choice before her seemed impossible, the uncertain promise of a city where she knew no one, or the unexpected kindness of a near stranger offering shelter. "The cabin," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "If you're certain, I'd like to see the cabin." Preston nodded, surprised at the relief he felt. "I'll get your bag back then." Within 15 minutes, they were headed out of town, Hannah and Emma in Preston's wagon while he rode alongside on his horse. As Seligman disappeared behind them, Hannah felt something tight in her chest begin to loosen. Whether she was making a terrible mistake or finding an unexpected salvation, at least she was moving forward. The road to Cottonwood Creek Ranch wound through juniper-dotted hills and across stretches of open rangeland. Preston pointed out landmarks as they traveled, giving Hannah time to adjust to the sudden change in her circumstances. He didn't press her with questions or unwanted conversation, a courtesy she deeply appreciated. Emma woke as they crossed a shallow stream, her tiny face scrunching in hunger. Hannah fumbled with her shawl, trying to create privacy to feed her daughter. "There's a grove of cottonwoods just ahead," Preston said, noticing her discomfort. "We can stop there for a spell, give you both a chance to rest." The natural courtesy in his manner eased Hannah's apprehension. When they reached the cottonwoods, Preston helped her down from the wagon, then busied himself watering the horses while she settled against a tree trunk to nurse Emma. "It's beautiful here," Hannah said when he returned, Emma now contentedly sleeping against her shoulder. The landscape stretched out before them, rugged, untamed, but with an austere beauty that touched something deep within her. "It grows on you," Preston agreed, sitting a respectful distance away. "When I first came from Texas, I thought it was the loneliest place I'd ever seen. Now I can't imagine being anywhere else." "How long have you had your ranch?" Hannah asked. "Going on 5 years now. Started with barely enough land for a vegetable garden and a few head of cattle. It's grown some since then." Pride colored his voice, but without boastfulness. Hannah nodded, impressed by his accomplishment. "And you manage it alone?" "Got 2 hands that help with the cattle, Miguel and his son Tomas. They live in a bunkhouse near the main house. There's Mrs. Gunderson, too, comes in 3 days a week from her place down the valley to cook and keep house." Preston glanced at her. "None of them will bother you at the cabin. It's set off a ways near the creek." The consideration in his planning surprised her. "Mr. Hayes, I don't mean to seem ungrateful, but I have to ask, why are you doing this? Helping me could damage your standing in town." Preston looked out over the landscape before answering. "Miss Reid, I've never much cared what the fine folks of Seligman think of me. I do business there, but my life is here." He paused. "As for why, I believe a person should be judged by their character, not by others' opinions. You struck me as someone who's faced hard choices with courage. That's worth respecting." His simple honesty disarmed her practiced defenses. For months, Hannah had been braced against judgment, scorn, and unwanted advances from men who assumed her situation made her available. Preston Hayes offered something she hadn't expected: respect without conditions. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I hope I can repay your kindness someday." "No debt between us," Preston replied, standing and dusting off his trousers. "We should get moving if we want to reach the ranch by sundown." The remainder of the journey passed in companionable silence. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, they crested a low rise, and Preston pointed ahead. "Cottonwood Creek." Hannah's breath caught at the sight. The ranch spread across a gentle valley, verdant with spring growth. A creek, lined with the cottonwoods that gave the ranch its name, curved through the property. Several structures dotted the landscape: a modest but well-built main house, a barn, what looked like a bunkhouse, and corrals with horses and cattle. "It's lovely," Hannah said sincerely. Preston's expression softened with pride. "It's not much compared to some spreads, but it's mine, free and clear." They continued down into the valley. As they approached the ranch buildings, Hannah spotted a smaller structure set apart from the others, nestled among cottonwoods near the creek. "That's the cabin," Preston said, following her gaze. "My first home here. It's simple but sound." When they reached the cabin, Hannah was pleasantly surprised. Though small, it was well built and carefully maintained. A covered porch faced the creek, and wildflowers grew beside the front steps. Preston tied his horse to the hitching post and helped Hannah down from the wagon. "Let me show you inside," he said, leading the way. The cabin consisted of one main room with a stone fireplace, a small bedroom off to one side, and a lean-to kitchen addition at the back. The furnishings were spare but serviceable: a table with chairs, a rocking chair by the fireplace, a bed frame with a straw tick mattress in the bedroom. "I know it's not much," Preston began, suddenly seeming uncertain. "It's perfect," Hannah interrupted, emotion thickening her voice. After months of judgment and rejection, the simple cabin represented something she'd almost lost hope of finding: a safe haven. Preston looked relieved. "The pump outside draws good water," outhouse is behind the cabin. I had Miguel stock the pantry with basics, and there's firewood stacked on the back porch. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small pouch. Some seed packets too if you want to plant a garden. The soil's good here. Hannah blinked back unexpected tears at his thoughtfulness. Mr. Hayes, I don't know how to thank you. Preston, please, he said. And no thanks needed. I'll have Mrs. Gunderson bring over some more supplies tomorrow. He moved toward the door, clearly wanting to give her space to settle in. If you need anything before then, the main house is just over the rise. Hannah followed him to the porch, Emma still sleeping against her shoulder. Preston, she said, testing the name. Thank you, truly. He smiled then, a warm expression that transformed his weathered features. Welcome to Cottonwood Creek, Miss Reid. Hannah, she replied. If I'm to call you Preston, then you must call me Hannah, he nodded, touching the brim of his hat. Hannah, then. Rest well. As Preston rode toward the main house, Hannah stood on the porch watching him go, a strange mixture of gratitude and trepidation filling her. This unexpected kindness from a near stranger had altered the course of her life in ways she couldn't yet imagine. But for the first time in many months, the future held something beyond mere survival. That night, with Emma sleeping peacefully in a makeshift cradle fashioned from a drawer, Hannah sat in the rocking chair watching firelight dance across the cabin walls. The simple space already felt more like home than her rooms in Seligman ever had. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, in this quiet haven, Hannah allowed herself to hope. Dawn broke over Cottonwood Creek Ranch with a gentle chorus of birdsong and the distant lowing of cattle. Hannah woke to find Emma already awake, gurgling happily in her makeshift cradle. After nursing her daughter and washing up at the basin, Hannah ventured outside to explore her new surroundings in the morning light. The cabin stood in a small clearing surrounded by cottonwoods, their leaves shimmering silver green in the early breeze. The creek bubbled nearby, clear water flowing over smooth stones. Hannah inhaled deeply, savoring the scents of sage and juniper carried on the morning air. A fine morning to you, Miss Reid. Hannah turned to find an older woman approaching from the direction of the main house, carrying a covered basket. Stout and silver-haired, with a weathered face creased by smile lines, she radiated a no-nonsense competence. Mrs. Gunderson, I presume? Hannah asked. Indeed. The woman nodded approvingly. And that little one must be your daughter. Preston told me you'd be staying in the cabin for a spell. If she harbored any judgment about Hannah's circumstances, it didn't show in her forthright gaze. Yes, this is Emma, Hannah confirmed, adjusting her hold on the baby. It's kind of you to come by. Brought you some breakfast fixings and a few other necessities. Mrs. Gunderson handed over the basket. Fresh bread, eggs, bacon, preserves. Some milk from our cow too, though I expect the little one's still taking her meals direct. Hannah flushed slightly but nodded. Thank you. This is very generous. Mrs. Gunderson waved away her thanks. Not at all. Preston asked me to see you had what you needed. Man's too busy with a new herd coming in to remember women need more than jerky and coffee. She said this with obvious affection for her employer. Hannah smiled, warming to the older woman's practical manner. Have you worked for Mr. Hayes long? Going on 4 years now. My Albert, God rest him, left me a small spread down the valley. Too much for me to work alone, so I keep house for Preston 3 days a week and tend my place the rest of the time. She glanced around the cabin clearing. This spot's good for a kitchen garden. Soil's rich here by the creek. Mr. Hayes mentioned that, Hannah said. He gave me some seed packets yesterday. Mrs. Gunderson nodded approvingly. Smart man. Nothing settles the soul like growing things. She turned to leave, then paused. Miss Reid, I don't know your story and it's not my place to ask. but Preston Hayes is a good man with a fair heart. If he's offered you shelter, you can trust his word." Hannah felt a surge of gratitude for the woman's straightforward acceptance. "Thank you, Mrs. Gunderson. That means a great deal." The older woman nodded. "I'll be back day after tomorrow. If you need anything before then, just send word to the main house." After Mrs. Gunderson left, Hannah explored the cabin more thoroughly in daylight. The previous inhabitants had left a few books on a small shelf, practical guides to ranching and farming, a well-worn Bible, and surprisingly, a volume of Emerson's essays. She ran her fingers over the spines, grateful for these unexpected treasures. The kitchen lean-to was equipped with a cast iron stove, a dry sink, and simple shelving stocked with basic provisions. Hannah found herself wondering about Preston Hayes, the kind of man who would maintain this cabin so carefully despite no longer living in it. After breakfast, Hannah decided to start the garden. Working with Emma nestled in a shawl against her chest, she cleared a patch of ground near the cabin and began turning the soil with a hoe she'd found in the lean-to. The physical labor felt good after months of confinement and shame in Seligman, where she'd grown accustomed to keeping her head down and avoiding notice. She was so absorbed in her task that she didn't hear the approaching hoofbeats until Preston's voice startled her. "You don't waste any time, do you?" Hannah straightened, pushing back a strand of hair that had escaped her bun. Preston sat atop his chestnut gelding, an amused smile playing across his features. "I thought I'd make use of those seeds you gave me," she explained, suddenly self-conscious about her disheveled appearance. Preston dismounted, leading his horse closer. "Good thinking. Garden will thrive here." He studied her handiwork with approval. "Though you might want to extend it another few feet that way. Afternoon sun's best for vegetables." Hannah nodded, making a mental note. "Thank you for the advice, and for sending Mrs. Gunderson. She was very kind." "Gertie's got a good heart," Preston agreed. Straightforward, too calls things as she sees them. A comfortable silence fell between them. Emma stirred against Hannah's chest, making small, fussing noises. "Would you like to see the rest of the ranch?" Preston offered unexpectedly. "I could show you around, help you get your bearings." Hannah hesitated. "I wouldn't want to impose on your workday." "Not an imposition," he assured her. "I need to check the north pasture fence line anyway. Could take the wagon, make it easier with the little one." The idea of seeing more of this place that had so unexpectedly become her refuge appealed strongly. "I'd like that," Hannah decided. "Just give me a moment to clean up and settle Emma." 20 minutes later, they were heading across the ranch in Preston's wagon. Emma, fed and content, dozed in a nest of blankets between them. Preston pointed out features of the property as they traveled the main grazing pastures, the line cabins used during roundup, the spring that fed Cottonwood Creek. "How many cattle do you run?" Hannah asked, genuinely interested. "About 300 head now, started with just 20. Pride colored his voice, hoping to double that in the next few years if the market holds. "That's impressive," Hannah said sincerely, "building something from almost nothing." Preston glanced at her. "Seems to me you're doing something similar." The observation, delivered without pity or judgment, touched Hannah deeply. "I suppose I am," she agreed quietly. They crested a rise and Preston reined in the horses. Below them, the land opened into a broad valley, dotted with cattle and bounded by distant purple mountains. The beauty of the vista momentarily stole Hannah's breath. "This is what sold me on this place," Preston said, gazing out over his domain. "First time I rode up here and saw this view, I knew I'd found home." Hannah understood completely. There was a wild majesty to the landscape that spoke to something fundamental in the human spirit, the desire for open spaces and the freedom to create one's own destiny. "It's magnificent," she said simply. They continued their tour, stopping occasionally for Preston to check fencing or water sources. Hannah was struck by his attention to detail, the way he seemed to know every inch of his land intimately. It spoke of a deep commitment, a quality she had always admired. "What brought you to Arizona territory?" she asked as they headed back toward the ranch buildings. "You mentioned you came from Texas." Preston adjusted the reins before answering. "My family had a small ranch near San Antonio. Lost it after my father died. Drought, debts, bad luck. I worked other men's spreads for years, saving every penny." His expression grew distant with memory. "Heard about land opening up out here, decided to take a chance, wanted something of my own." Hannah nodded, understanding the yearning for independence that had driven him. "And your family, are they still in Texas?" Mother passed 2 years after father. Brothers scattered, one's in California, other two still in Texas. A shadow crossed his face. "Don't see them much, right when we can." The simple admission of loneliness touched Hannah. For all his accomplishment, Preston Hayes had built his dream largely alone. "Thank you for showing me your ranch," she said as they approached the cabin. "It's truly remarkable what you've created here." Preston's weathered features softened with her praise. "Glad to share it. Gets lonely sometimes, not having folks to appreciate it with." The unguarded comment hung between them, revealing more than perhaps he'd intended. Hannah found herself wondering what kind of woman Preston Hayes might have hoped to share his achievement with, had circumstances been different. As he helped her down from the wagon, their hands met briefly. The contact, though fleeting, sent an unexpected warmth through Hannah. She quickly busied herself with gathering Emma, avoiding Preston's eyes. "I should get back to work," he said, sounding slightly flustered himself. "Miguel will wonder where I've disappeared to." Hannah nodded, suddenly shy. "Of course. Thank you again for the tour." Preston tipped his hat. "My pleasure, Hannah." As she watched him drive away, Hannah felt a curious mixture of emotions. Gratitude, certainly, for his kindness and generosity. But something else too, a spark of awareness she hadn't expected and wasn't sure she welcomed. Her life had been upended once by trusting too quickly, opening her heart to a man who had proven unworthy. She couldn't make the same mistake again, especially now that Emma depended on her. Yet as she carried her daughter into the cabin, Hannah couldn't help but recognize the fundamental difference between the smooth-talking salesman who had fathered Emma and the straightforward rancher who had offered them shelter. One had made promises easily and broken them just as easily. The other made few promises, but seemed like a man who would keep everyone. The thought accompanied Hannah through the evening as she prepared a simple supper and settled Emma for the night. Whatever feelings might be stirring, she reminded herself firmly, Preston Hayes had offered her shelter, not courtship. Misinterpreting his kindness would be the height of foolishness. Still, as she lay in bed that night listening to the soothing sounds of the creek, Hannah found herself thinking of Preston's smile, the quiet pride in his voice as he showed her his ranch, and the brief warmth of his hand helping her from the wagon. For the first time in many months, she fell asleep with something other than worry occupying her thoughts. The days slipped into a comfortable rhythm at Cottonwood Creek. Hannah established a routine centered around Emma's needs, but also found time to tend her growing garden, keep the cabin in order, and gradually explore more of her surroundings. Mrs. Gunderson's visits brought welcome conversation and practical advice about frontier housekeeping. Miguel and his son Tomás would occasionally tip their hats when their work brought them near the cabin, but they respected her privacy, something Hannah deeply appreciated. Preston himself maintained a polite distance, stopping by every few days to ensure Hannah and Emma had everything they needed. but never staying long enough for their conversations to move beyond pleasantries and practical matters. Hannah told herself this was for the best, yet found herself watching for his approach more eagerly than she cared to admit. 2 weeks after their arrival, Hannah was hanging laundry on a line strung between cottonwoods when she heard the now familiar sound of Preston's horse approaching. Emma lay on a blanket nearby, cooing at a mobile Hannah had fashioned from twigs and colorful fabric scraps. "Afternoon, Hannah," Preston called as he rode into view. Today he led a second horse, a gentle-looking bay mare. "Hello, Preston," she replied, securing a damp sheet to the line. "What brings you by?" He dismounted, leading both horses toward her. "Thought you might be getting tired of staying so close to the cabin. Brought Daisy here for you to ride if you'd like to see more of the countryside." Hannah glanced at the mare, then at Emma on her blanket. "That's very thoughtful, but I couldn't leave Emma." "Brought a solution for that too," Preston said, reaching into his saddlebag and withdrawing a length of sturdy fabric. "Indians use these to carry their babies. Miguel's wife showed me how to tie it. Baby rides secure against your chest, leaves your hands free for the reins." Hannah took the cloth, examining it with interest. The thoughtfulness of the gesture touched her deeply. "You went to all this trouble for us," Preston shrugged, looking slightly embarrassed. "Figured you might be feeling cooped up. Independence is important." The simple statement revealed his understanding of her situation in a way few others had demonstrated. Hannah smiled warmly at him. "Thank you. I'd love to ride, but it's been years since I was on a horse. Not since I left my parents' farm for teaching school." "Daisy's gentle as they come," Preston assured her, "and we'll take it slow." 30 minutes later, with Emma secured against her chest in the carrier and Preston's patient guidance refreshing her riding skills, Hannah found herself following a trail along Cottonwood Creek. The day was perfect for riding, sunny but not too hot, with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of sage and wildflowers. "You're a natural," Preston commented as Hannah easily guided Daisy around a bend in the trail. "Some folks never get comfortable in the saddle, no matter how long they try." "My father raised horses," Hannah explained. "I practically grew up riding, just never had the opportunity once I started teaching." A pang of nostalgia touched her. "I'd forgotten how much I loved it." Preston nodded, understanding. "Freedom like nothing else, isn't it? Just you, the horse, and open country." "Exactly," Hannah agreed, surprised and pleased by his perception. They rode in companionable silence for a while, following the creek as it wound through a small canyon. Emma, lulled by the gentle motion of the horse, had fallen asleep against Hannah's chest. "You never mentioned what brought you to Seligman," Preston said eventually. "Before everything happened." Hannah tensed slightly, but the question was asked with simple curiosity, not judgment. "I answered an advertisement for a schoolteacher," she explained. "The town was growing, needed someone educated to teach the children. I'd been teaching in Tucson but wanted something smaller, more personal." "How'd you come west originally?" Preston asked. Hannah's expression grew distant with memory. "My parents have a farm in Pennsylvania, small place, barely enough to support the family. I was the oldest of 6. Got my education at a normal school, then took a teaching position in Ohio." She paused. "When both my younger brothers decided to stay on the farm, I realized there wouldn't be a place for me there. So when I saw advertisements for teachers needed in the territories, I decided to take a chance." Preston nodded thoughtfully. "Takes courage to travel so far alone." "Or foolishness," Hannah said with a wry smile. "Depending on who you ask." "Courage," Preston insisted. "Same kind that brought you here with your daughter instead of giving in to what those town folks wanted." Hannah glanced at him, surprised by his perception. The town council had made it abundantly clear that she could have stayed in Seligman if she'd been willing to give Emma up for adoption, preferably to a proper family outside the territory. "I couldn't," she said simply. "She's mine." "As she should be," Preston agreed. His expression darkened slightly. Never understood folks who think separating mothers and children solves problems rather than creating new ones. The conviction in his voice made Hannah curious. "You seem to have strong feelings about it." Preston was silent for a moment before responding. "My mother was Comanche," he said finally. "My father was a Texas Ranger who fell in love with her after she helped his patrol when they got lost. Her people disowned her for marrying him. His family never acknowledged her, but they made a good life together until he was killed." His jaw tightened. "After that, there were plenty of well-meaning folks who thought my brothers and I would be better off with proper families." "But your mother kept you together," Hannah guessed. Preston nodded, pride evident in his voice. "Worked herself nearly to death doing it, but she kept us. Taught us to be proud of both sides of our heritage." He glanced at Hannah, a hint of wariness in his eyes. "Does that change how you see me, knowing I'm half Indian?" Hannah studied him thoughtfully. His features, which she had attributed to weather and sun, now revealed subtle traces of his mixed heritage: the high cheekbones, the particular set of his dark eyes. "It helps me understand you better," she said honestly. "Your kindness to Emma and me, your disregard for the town's judgment." Relief flickered across Preston's face. Not everyone in the territories was accepting of mixed blood, regardless of how a man proved himself. "What happened to your mother?" Hannah asked gently. "Consumption," Preston replied, his voice softening with old grief. "She held on until my youngest brother was 16, then just let go. I think she'd been holding herself together by sheer will those last few years." "She sounds remarkable," Hannah said sincerely. "She was." Preston's expression lightened. "Would have liked you, I think. She valued education, made sure we all could read and cipher even when there was no school that would take us." They had reached a point where the creek widened into a small, clear pool. Preston dismounted and helped Hannah down, careful of Emma still sleeping against her chest. They let the horses drink while they settled on sun-warmed rocks at the water's edge. "This is beautiful," Hannah said, taking in the peaceful scene. Cottonwoods cast dappled shade over the pool and wildflowers dotted the grassy banks. "One of my favorite spots," Preston admitted. "Come here sometimes to think when ranch work gets overwhelming." Emma stirred against Hannah's chest, waking with small sounds of hunger. Hannah automatically began to loosen the carrier, then hesitated, glancing at Preston. Understanding immediately, he stood. "Think I'll check that stand of trees yonder for signs of beaver. Been losing some young cottonwoods lately." He walked away, giving Hannah privacy to feed her daughter. The simple courtesy, offered without awkwardness, added to Hannah's growing appreciation of Preston Hayes. By the time he returned, Emma was contentedly nursing, and Hannah was gazing out over the water. "No beaver sign," Preston reported, sitting down at a respectful distance. "Might be just natural die-off of the younger trees." They fell into easy conversation about the ranch, the approaching summer, the peculiarities of the Arizona climate. Hannah found herself relaxing in Preston's company in a way she hadn't with anyone since before Emma's birth. There was something fundamentally reassuring about his presence: solid, unpretentious, genuine. As the afternoon waned, they reluctantly mounted up for the return to the ranch. Hannah found herself wishing the day could stretch longer, a feeling she hadn't experienced in many months. "Thank you for this," she said as they approached the cabin. "It was exactly what I needed." Preston smiled, the expression warming his usually reserved features. "My pleasure. Daisy's yours to ride whenever you like. Just let Miguel know if you're heading out alone so someone knows where you are." The thoughtfulness behind the offer, giving her freedom while ensuring her safety, touched Hannah deeply. "I appreciate that, and your company today." A hint of color touched Preston's cheekbones. "Enjoyed it myself. Been a while since I had conversation that wasn't about cattle prices or fence repairs." They had reached the cabin. Preston dismounted first, then reached up to help Hannah down. As his hands circled her waist, their eyes met briefly. Something flickered between them, a spark of awareness, quickly banked but unmistakable. Hannah stepped back, flustered. "I should get Emma inside for her evening feeding." Preston nodded, suddenly formal. "Of course. Good evening, Hannah." "Good evening, Preston, and thank you again." As she watched him ride away, leading Daisy behind him, Hannah pressed a hand to her racing heart. The unexpected connection she'd felt with Preston Hayes was both exhilarating and terrifying. Her judgment in men had proven catastrophically flawed once before. Could she trust these new feelings, or was she setting herself up for another devastating mistake? That night, as Emma slept peacefully, Hannah sat on the cabin porch watching fireflies rise from the grasses near the creek. She found herself reflecting on the contrast between James Thornton, the smooth, talking salesman who had fathered Emma, and Preston Hayes. James had been all flash and charm, his affection expressed in grand gestures and prettier words than Hannah had ever heard. He had sworn undying love after barely 2 weeks' acquaintance, promising marriage and a fine house in San Francisco once he settled his affairs. Hannah, lonely and flattered by his attention, had believed him, giving herself to him the night before he left Seligman. She never saw him again. Preston, by contrast, made no grand promises or declarations. His actions spoke instead: the carefully maintained cabin, the seeds for her garden, the borrowed mare so she could regain a piece of her independence. There was substance to his kindness, rooted in respect rather than desire. Hannah sighed, wrapping her shawl more tightly around her shoulders as the evening air cooled. She couldn't deny her growing attraction to Preston, but neither could she afford to indulge it. She had Emma to consider now, and Preston, for all his kindness, had offered shelter, not courtship. Misinterpreting his generosity would be the height of foolishness. With that resolution firmly in mind, Hannah went inside to bed. Yet her dreams that night were filled with images of Preston's smile and the strong, gentle hands that had helped her from Daisy's back. June bloomed across Cottonwood Creek Ranch in a riot of wildflowers and lengthening days. Hannah's garden flourished, yielding early lettuces and radishes, with promises of more abundant harvests to come. Emma grew too, beginning to sit up on her own and babbling in earnest conversation with anyone who would listen. Hannah found herself settling into ranch life with unexpected ease. The isolation that might have troubled another woman felt like blessed peace after the scrutiny and judgment she'd endured in Seligman. She established routines, taking Emma for daily walks, riding Daisy several times a week, helping Mrs. Gunderson with preserving the garden's bounty. Preston remained a constant but unobtrusive presence. He would stop by the cabin every few days, always with some practical purpose: delivering firewood, checking the roof before summer thunderstorms, bringing books he thought might interest her. Their conversations grew more comfortable, ranging from ranch operations to books they'd both read, to gentle teasing about Hannah's sometimes overzealous gardening. Yet an unspoken boundary remained between them, one that neither seemed willing to cross. Hannah told herself this was wise, prudent, necessary. She wasn't in a position to offer or accept romantic attachment, not with Emma's welfare her primary concern. And Preston, despite his kindness, had never indicated he viewed her as anything other than a responsibility he had willingly assumed. Everything changed on a sweltering afternoon in late June. Hannah had just put Emma down for her afternoon nap when she noticed dark clouds building rapidly over the mountains to the west. The suddenness of their appearance concerned her. She'd learned that summer storms in this country could develop with frightening speed and violence. She was securing the cabin shutters when Preston rode into the clearing at a gallop, his expression urgent. "Flash flood warning," he called as he dismounted. "Creeks rising fast upstream. Need to get you and Emma to higher ground." Hannah's heart raced. "How much time do we have?" "Not sure. Storms dumping water in the high country. Miguel's already moved the cattle to the upper pasture." Preston was already striding toward the cabin. "Grab what you need for the night. You'll stay at the main house until we're sure the danger's past." Hannah didn't argue. She quickly gathered Emma, still sleeping, and wrapped her in a blanket. She stuffed a few essentials into a bag while Preston secured the cabin, banking the cookstove fire and moving valuable items to higher shelves. Outside, the sky had darkened ominously, and a distant rumble of thunder carried on the wind. Preston lifted Hannah onto his horse, then handed Emma up to her before mounting behind them. His arms encircled Hannah as he took the reins, creating a protective cage around her and the baby. "Hold tight," he instructed, turning the horse toward the main house. They were halfway across the open ground between the cabin and the ranch buildings when the storm broke over them. Rain fell in blinding sheets, driven by gusting wind. Emma woke, crying in fear at the thunder that now crashed directly overhead. Preston urged his horse to a faster pace, leaning forward to shield Hannah and Emma as best he could. Hannah clutched her daughter close, murmuring reassurances that were lost in the storm's fury. They had just reached the ranch yard when a deafening crack split the air. Hannah looked up to see a massive cottonwood, struck by lightning, toppling directly in their path. Preston reacted instantly, wrenching the horse aside, but the animal reared in panic. Hannah felt herself slipping. Emma clutched tightly to her chest. Preston's arm locked around her waist, holding her and Emma secure as he fought to control the frightened horse. For one terrible moment, Hannah thought they would all go down, but Preston's strength and skill prevailed. He brought the horse under control and urged it forward, past the fallen tree and into the shelter of the barn. Miguel was waiting inside, taking the reins as Preston dismounted. Without a word, Preston lifted Hannah and Emma down, his hands lingering at Hannah's waist as he steadied her on shaking legs. "Are you hurt?" he asked urgently, his eyes searching her face. Hannah shook her head, though her heart still raced with fear and something else she wasn't ready to name. "We're fine, thanks to you." Relief washed across Preston's features. He reached out, gently brushing wet hair back from Hannah's face. The simple gesture, tender and protective, broke something open inside her. "Preston," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the storm raging outside. Something changed in his expression, a guardedness falling away to reveal naked emotion. For a breathless moment, Hannah thought he might kiss her. Instead, he stepped back, his professional manner returning like a mask sliding into place. "Let's get you both to the house," he said, his voice deliberately steady. "You need dry clothes and warm food." The main house was larger than Hannah had expected, built of sturdy logs with a wide porch and generous windows. Inside, a central great room held comfortable furnishings arranged around a massive stone fireplace. The walls were lined with bookshelves, and colorful Navajo rugs covered the plank floors. Mrs. Gunderson bustled forward at their entrance, clucking with concern at their soaked condition. "Land sakes, you're drenched to the bone. Come, come. I've hot water ready for baths and dry clothes laid out. She led Hannah to a bedroom off the main room where a copper tub steamed invitingly behind a screen. Clean towels and a simple calico dress, one of Mrs. Gunderson's, Hannah guessed, were laid out on the bed. "Get yourself and the little one warm," the housekeeper instructed. "I'll have supper ready when you're done." Left alone, Hannah gently undressed Emma, relieved to find the baby mostly dry thanks to the blanket that had protected her. She bathed her daughter first, then quickly washed herself, grateful for the hot water that eased the chill from her bones. The borrowed dress was too large but clean and dry, which was all that mattered. When Hannah emerged with Emma, she found Preston standing by the fireplace, changed into dry clothes himself. He turned at her approach, and something in his expression made her heart skip. "Better?" he asked softly. Hannah nodded. "Much, thank you, and thank you for your quick action earlier." "If you hadn't been there." Preston shook his head, dismissing her gratitude. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," Hannah disagreed gently. "Not anyone." Their eyes met, and that same electric awareness Hannah had felt in the barn crackled between them. This time neither looked away. Mrs. Gunderson's voice broke the moment. "Supper's ready, you two. Come eat while it's hot." The meal passed in surprisingly comfortable conversation, with Miguel joining them to report that the cattle were secure and the creek, while high, showed signs of receding. Outside, the storm gradually diminished to a steady rain, the thunder moving off to the east. "Creek should be safe by morning," Preston said as they finished eating. "But you and Emma will stay here tonight just to be certain." Hannah nodded her agreement, secretly glad for the excuse to remain. There was something deeply comforting about the house Preston had built. It reflected his character in its solid construction and thoughtful details. After supper, Mrs. Gunderson insisted on taking Emma, who had grown fussy with all the excitement. "You rest yourself," she told Hannah firmly. "I raised 5 of my own, know how to settle a baby." Left alone with Preston in the great room, Hannah found herself suddenly shy. He stood by the window watching the rain, his profile limned by firelight. The strength and grace she'd come to admire were evident in his stance, but there was vulnerability too in the set of his shoulders. "Your home is beautiful," Hannah said, breaking the silence. Preston turned, a smile touching his lips. "Thank you. Built most of it myself with Miguel's help." "It suits you," Hannah observed, running her fingers along the carefully crafted bookshelf. "Solid, unpretentious, welcoming." His expression softened at the description. "High praise." Hannah moved to stand beside him at the window. Outside, the rain had gentled to a soft patter and stars were beginning to appear as clouds thinned and scattered. "Storm's passing," Preston noted. "Yes," Hannah agreed, though neither moved away from the window or each other. When Preston finally spoke again, his voice was low, almost hesitant. "Hannah, there's something I've been wanting to ask you." She turned to face him, her heart suddenly racing. "Yes," Preston took a deep breath. "I know you came here out of necessity, not choice, and I've tried to respect that, to give you space and time." He paused, seeming to search for words. "But these past weeks, watching you with Emma, seeing how you've made the cabin your own, I've come to admire you greatly." Hannah stood very still, scarcely breathing as Preston continued. "I'm not a man for fancy words or grand gestures," he said, his gaze steady on hers. "But I care for you, Hannah, more than I expected to, more than might be wise given your circumstances." He hesitated. "I don't want to press where I'm not welcome, but I needed you to know." The simple honesty of his declaration moved Hannah deeply. There were no extravagant promises, no attempts to dazzle or impress, just the truth, offered with respect and without expectation. "Preston," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, "I care for you too, But Emma must come first in my decisions now. And I've made such terrible mistakes in judgment." "I know," Preston said gently, "and I would never ask you to choose between Emma's welfare and anything else. She's part of who you are." He reached out slowly, as if giving her time to pull away, and took her hand in his. "I'm not asking for answers tonight, just that you might consider the possibility of something more between us, in time." Hannah looked down at their joined hands, his large and work-roughened, hers smaller but equally marked by labor. There was something right about the sight, something that spoke to her heart more eloquently than words. "I will consider it," she promised softly. "But I need time, Preston, time to be sure," he nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Time you shall have, as much as you need." The moment was interrupted by Mrs. Gunderson's return with a now sleeping Emma. "This little one's down for the night," she announced. "Put her in the cradle in your room, Miss Reid." Hannah reluctantly withdrew her hand from Preston's, though the warmth of his touch lingered. "Thank you, Mrs. Gunderson. I should turn in as well, it's been quite a day." Preston nodded, stepping back to a more proper distance. "Of course. Sleep well, Hannah." "Good night, Preston," she replied, her voice soft with unspoken emotion. That night, lying in the unfamiliar bed with Emma sleeping peacefully in the cradle beside her, Hannah found herself at a crossroads. The feelings growing between her and Preston could not be denied, yet the memory of her disastrous judgment with James still haunted her. How could she trust her heart again, especially now that Emma's future hung in the balance? Yet, as she drifted toward sleep, Hannah found herself thinking not of James's empty promises, but of Preston's steady presence, of his hands guiding Daisy's reins as he taught her to ride again, of his quiet pride as he showed her the ranch he'd built from nothing, of his arms around her during the storm, protecting her and Emma without hesitation. Perhaps, Hannah thought as sleep finally claimed her, there was more than one kind of wisdom. Perhaps learning to distinguish between false charm and genuine worth was its own form of growth. And perhaps, in time, she could learn to trust again, not blindly, but with open eyes and a wiser heart. July brought relentless heat to Cottonwood Creek Ranch. The days stretched long and dry, the sun baking the land until even the hardy sagebrush seemed to wilt. Hannah adapted her routines to the weather, working in the garden during the cooler morning hours and staying close to the cabin during the worst of the afternoon heat. In the weeks following the storm, a subtle change had occurred in her relationship with Preston. Nothing overt, they maintained the same patterns of occasional visits and practical assistance, but beneath the surface, awareness hummed between them like electricity. A lingering glance, a touch that lasted a moment longer than necessary, conversations that delved deeper into hopes and memories. Hannah found herself looking forward to his visits with an anticipation she couldn't deny, even as she continued to hold part of herself in reserve. Preston, true to his word, pressed nothing, asking for no declarations or promises. Yet his feelings were evident in 100 small ways, the books he brought that matched her expressed interests, the wildflowers that appeared on her porch on mornings when he rode out early, the way he listened intently when she spoke as if her thoughts were treasures. Emma, now 8 months old, was crawling with determined energy and pulling herself up on furniture. She had developed a particular fondness for Preston, breaking into delighted babbling whenever he appeared. Hannah couldn't help but notice how naturally he interacted with her daughter, getting down on the floor to play with her, or telling her simple stories in his deep, gentle voice. It was after one such visit, as Preston was preparing to leave, that Hannah finally voiced the question that had been growing in her mind. "Preston," she began as they stood on the cabin porch in the golden light of late afternoon. "May I ask you something?" He turned to her, his expression open. Of course. Hannah hesitated, then pressed on. You've been so kind to Emma and me, generous beyond anything we could have expected, but I've never asked what do you want in return. Preston's brow furrowed slightly. Want in return? Yes. Hannah met his gaze steadily. Most people want something, especially from a woman in my position. Understanding dawned in Preston's eyes, followed by a flash of sadness that she would need to ask such a question. Hannah, he said quietly, I didn't offer you and Emma shelter with any expectation of payment of any kind. Then why? Hannah pressed. Why take such responsibility for two strangers? Preston was silent for a moment, considering his answer carefully. When I first saw you in Seligman that day, standing there with Emma, facing judgment with your head high despite everything, it reminded me of my mother. His voice softened with memory. She had that same courage, refusing to bow to others' opinions about what was proper or right. He moved to the porch railing, looking out over the land as he continued. I offered help because it was the right thing to do. I've continued to offer it because having you and Emma here has brought life to this place in a way I didn't realize was missing. He turned back to her, his expression earnest. The only thing I want, Hannah, is for you to feel safe here, free to build whatever future you choose. The simple sincerity of his answer moved Hannah deeply. In a world where motives were rarely pure and kindness often came with hidden costs, Preston Hayes stood apart, a man whose actions aligned perfectly with his words. I do feel safe here, Hannah admitted softly. Safer than I have in a very long time. Preston's expression warmed. I'm glad. A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only when Emma's demanding cries came from inside the cabin where she had awakened from her nap. I should go, Preston said, though he made no immediate move to leave. Hannah nodded, equally reluctant to end their conversation. Will you come for supper tomorrow? I've harvested the first beans from the garden, and Mrs. Gunderson showed me her recipe for cornbread. The invitation, the first she had extended, brought a smile to Preston's face that transformed his normally serious features. I'd like that very much. After he had gone, Hannah stood on the porch for several minutes, a curious lightness in her chest. The wariness that had become her constant companion since James's betrayal seemed to be slowly dissolving, replaced by something she had almost forgotten how to feel: hope. The next evening, Hannah put extra care into preparations for Preston's visit. She bathed Emma and dressed her in her best gown, then changed into her own Sunday dress, a simple blue cotton that Mrs. Gunderson had altered to fit her properly. She arranged wildflowers on the table and made sure the cabin was spotless. Preston arrived precisely at the agreed time, freshly shaved and wearing a clean shirt. He presented Hannah with a small package wrapped in brown paper. "What's this?" she asked, surprised by the unexpected gift. "Open it," Preston encouraged. Inside was a beautifully carved wooden rattle, polished smooth and filled with something that made a gentle sound when shaken. "For Emma," Preston explained. "Thought she might enjoy it." Hannah was touched by the thoughtfulness of the gift. "Did you make this?" Preston nodded, a hint of color rising in his cheeks. "In the evenings. Not much else to do when the work's done." Hannah immediately offered the rattle to Emma, who seized it with delight, shaking it vigorously and laughing at the sound. "She loves it," Hannah said, smiling up at Preston. "Thank you." The evening unfolded with an ease that surprised them both. They talked over supper, their conversation ranging from books they'd both read to Preston's plans for the fall cattle drive. Hannah found herself laughing more than she had in months, drawn out of her shell by Preston's dry humor and genuine interest in her thoughts. After the meal, they moved to the porch to enjoy the cooler evening air. Emma, worn out from the excitement, had fallen asleep in her makeshift cradle inside the cabin door where Hannah could hear her if she woke. "The stars are incredible here," Hannah remarked, gazing up at the vast canopy of the night sky. Away from town lights, the stars blazed with an intensity that still took her breath away after months in Arizona. Preston nodded agreement. "Never tire of looking at them. Makes a man feel small, but in a good way." Hannah glanced at him curiously. "What do you mean?" Preston considered his words carefully. "Out here, under all those stars, you realize you're just one small part of something much bigger. Your troubles seem smaller too, somehow." He smiled slightly. "My mother used to say the stars were holes in the floor of heaven, letting light shine through." "That's beautiful," Hannah said softly. "I like that idea." They fell silent, comfortable together in the gathering darkness. Crickets chirped in the grasses near the creek, and a cool breeze carried the scent of sage and distant rain. "Hannah," Preston said eventually, his voice quiet but steady, "there's something I'd like to discuss with you." She turned toward him, something in his tone making her pulse quicken. "Yes." Preston shifted to face her more directly. "I've been thinking about the cabin. With Emma growing so quickly, you'll need more space soon. I'd like to add a proper bedroom for her, maybe expand the kitchen too." Hannah blinked, surprised by the practical nature of his comment when she'd expected something else. "That's very generous, but it's a lot of work and expense for a temporary arrangement. Does it need to be temporary?" The simple question hung in the air between them. Hannah's breath caught as she realized the deeper meaning behind Preston's practical suggestion. "What are you asking exactly?" she said carefully. Preston took a deep breath. "I'm asking if you'd consider making Cottonwood Creek your permanent home." He paused, then added with characteristic directness, "with me." Hannah's heart raced. "Preston, are you proposing?" "Not exactly. Not yet." He reached for her hand, his touch gentle but sure. "I know it's too soon for that. You need more time, and I respect that. But I wanted you to know that's where my heart is heading." His eyes held her steadily in the starlight. "I care for you, Hannah, and for Emma. I want to build a future with you both if you'll have me." The sincerity in his voice left no room for doubt. This was no impulsive declaration or manipulative promise, but a carefully considered offering of his heart and life. "I care for you too," Hannah admitted, her voice soft but clear. "More than I expected to. More than I thought I could after." "Everything?" Preston's hand tightened slightly around hers. "I know James hurt you deeply. Betrayed your trust in the worst way. I can't promise I'll never make mistakes, but I can promise I'll never deliberately cause you pain." Hannah looked into his eyes, seeing nothing there but honest emotion. "I believe you," she said, realizing with some surprise that she truly did. Preston smiled, relief and happiness lighting his features. "Then we have time. No need to rush decisions. Let's add that bedroom to the cabin, see how things develop between us." The wisdom and patience in his approach confirmed everything Hannah had come to admire about him. There was no pressure, no demand, just an honest sharing of feelings and intentions, leaving her room to move forward at her own pace. "I'd like that," she agreed softly. Preston raised her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. The gesture, simple and old-fashioned, sent warmth spreading through Hannah's entire body. "May I call on you properly?" he asked. "Sunday dinners, maybe rides when the weather's cooler." Hannah smiled, charmed by his formal courtesy. "I'd like that very much." They sat together a while longer, hands joined, watching the stars wheel slowly overhead. When Preston finally rose to leave, there was a new understanding between them, nothing rushed or desperate, but a quiet recognition of possibilities unfolding. At the bottom of the porch steps, Preston turned back. "Good night, Hannah." "Good night, Preston," she replied, her heart lighter than it had been in more than a year. As summer gave way to the cooler days of early autumn, Hannah and Preston's relationship deepened through daily interactions and quiet moments shared. True to his word, Preston began work on the cabin addition, enlisting Miguel and Tomás to help with the construction while Hannah offered input on the design. Emma continued to thrive, taking her first tentative steps and adding "mama" and, to Hannah's surprised delight, "please" to her limited vocabulary. The bond growing between her daughter and Preston touched Hannah deeply. He treated Emma with the same gentle respect he showed to Hannah, neither overstepping bounds nor holding himself aloof. Word of Hannah's presence at Cottonwood Creek had eventually reached Seligman, bringing mixed reactions. Reverend Wilkins sent a sternly worded letter reminding Hannah of her moral obligations and suggesting she reconsider giving Emma up for adoption, a letter Hannah promptly consigned to the fire. Mrs. Thornton from the general store, however, paid a tentative visit, bringing baby clothes Emma had outgrown and a shy apology for not standing up for Hannah during the town council meeting. "People are talking, of course," Mrs. Thornton admitted as they sat on the cabin porch drinking tea. "About you living here unchaperoned." Hannah tensed slightly. "And what do they say?" Mrs. Thornton sighed. "Oh, the usual nonsense, but anyone with eyes can see Mr. Hayes is an honorable man, and you've both been most proper." She patted Hannah's hand. "Don't fret over gossip, my dear. Those with nothing better to do will always find something to criticize." The visit, though brief, helped heal some of Hannah's lingering hurt over her treatment in Seligman. Not everyone had judged her harshly. She realized some had simply lacked the courage to speak against the majority. As October painted the cottonwoods gold and crimson, Preston completed the fall cattle drive to Flagstaff, returning with news that beef prices were strong, and the ranch's reputation for quality stock was growing. The success meant financial security for Cottonwood Creek and possibilities for the future that Preston was eager to discuss with Hannah. They were riding together along the creek one crisp afternoon, Emma secure in the carrier on Hannah's back, when Preston brought up the subject. "I've been thinking," he began, guiding his horse alongside Daisy. "With the profits from this drive, I could expand the main house, add rooms." Hannah glanced at him, understanding the implication. "Is that something you want to do?" Preston nodded, his expression serious. "Been living alone too long. House needs a family to make it a home." He looked at her directly. "I'd like that family to be you and Emma." Although they had been moving steadily in this direction for months, the clarity of Preston's statement still made Hannah's heart skip. "Are you proposing, Mr. Hayes?" she asked, a smile playing at her lips. Preston reined his horse to a stop, prompting Hannah to do the same. "I am, Miss Reid," he confirmed, his voice deep with emotion. "Properly this time." He reached across the space between their horses to take her hand. "I love you, Hannah. You and Emma both. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" The sincerity in his face left no room for doubt. This was no hasty proposal or convenience marriage, but a declaration born of genuine feeling and careful consideration. "I love you too," Hannah said softly, the words coming easily now that they were finally spoken. "And yes, I will marry you." Joy transformed Preston's weathered features. He quickly dismounted and came to help Hannah down from Daisy. As soon as her feet touched the ground, he drew her into his arms, mindful of Emma on her back, and kissed her with gentle passion. When they parted, both slightly breathless, Emma let out a delighted squeal and reached for Preston. He laughed, helping Hannah remove the carrier so he could take the baby in his arms. "What do you think, Miss Emma?" he asked, lifting her high to her squealing delight. "Shall we make it official? Be a proper family?" Emma responded by patting his cheeks with her small hands, which Preston took as enthusiastic agreement. Hannah watched them together, her heart full. This man, who had offered shelter when she most needed it, had become the center of a new life she could never have imagined in her darkest days in Seligman. When? Hannah asked as they remounted to continue their ride. The wedding, I mean, Preston considered. Before winter sets in would be best. November, perhaps. Give us time to prepare, but not so long we have to worry about snow. Hannah nodded agreement. I'd like Mrs. Gunderson to stand with me if she's willing, and Emma, of course. Miguel will be my best man, Preston decided. Known him since I came to Arizona. They spent the remainder of the ride discussing practical wedding arrangements. Neither wanted anything elaborate, just a simple ceremony with the few people they considered friends, followed by a celebration at the ranch. Reverend Johnston from Flagstaff, who had a reputation for progressive thinking, would perform the ceremony rather than the judgmental Reverend Wilkins from Seligman. As they approached the ranch buildings, Preston asked hesitantly, "Would you want to invite your family, your parents or siblings?" Hannah was quiet for a moment before responding. "I'll write to them, tell them about you, about our plans," she sighed softly. "But I don't expect they'll come. They made their feelings about my situation quite clear." Preston's jaw tightened. "Their loss," he said simply. "You and Emma are treasures they're fools to discard." His unwavering support warmed Hannah deeply. "Well, they're missing quite a wedding," she said, deliberately lightening the mood. "The nuptials of Cottonwood Creek's finest rancher," Preston chuckled. "Cottonwood Creek's only rancher, you mean?" "Still the finest," Hannah insisted with a smile. The weeks leading up to the wedding passed in a flurry of preparations. Hannah, with Mrs. Gunderson's help, sewed a new dress of cream-colored wool with lace trim at the collar and cuffs. Emma would wear a matching dress that Mrs. Thornton had helped fashion from the same material. Preston, meanwhile, focused on completing the additions to both buildings. The cabin received its new bedroom for Emma, and an expanded kitchen with a proper window overlooking the garden. The main house gained 2 new bedrooms, one for future children, Preston explained with a meaningful glance that made Hannah blush, and one for guests. "Though who'd visit us way out here, I'm not sure," he added with a wry smile. "You never know," Hannah replied. "Life has a way of surprising you." Indeed, life delivered a significant surprise 2 weeks before the wedding when a response arrived to Hannah's letter to her family. To her astonishment, it was not the expected rejection, but a cautiously positive reply from her youngest sister, Catherine. "She's coming," Hannah told Preston that evening, her voice reflecting her disbelief. "She arrives on the stage next week, says she's missed me terribly and wants to meet you and Emma." Preston squeezed her hand. "That's wonderful news. Is she staying for the wedding?" Hannah nodded, still processing the unexpected development. "She says Mother and Father send their regards." The formal phrasing revealed much about her parents' continued reservations, but the fact that they had allowed Catherine to come at all represented a significant shift. The day Catherine arrived brought both excitement and anxiety for Hannah. She hadn't seen her sister in over 3 years. Would they still connect as they once had? Would Catherine truly accept Emma or harbor hidden judgment? Preston insisted on accompanying Hannah to meet the stage in Seligman, his quiet presence beside her a reassuring anchor as the coach rattled into town. Catherine was the 3rd passenger to descend, a slender young woman of 20 with Hannah's same golden brown hair and direct gaze. For a moment, the sisters simply stared at each other across the dusty street. Then Catherine dropped her bag and rushed forward, throwing her arms around Hannah with a cry of joy. "I've missed you so much," she said, tears streaming down her face. "When your letters stopped coming last year, I feared the worst." Hannah held her sister tightly, her own eyes wet. "I'm sorry. There was so much happening and I didn't know how to explain. Catherine pulled back to look at Hannah's face. You don't need to explain anything to me. I'm just glad you're safe and well. She glanced at Preston, who stood a respectful distance away. And this must be your Mr. Hayes. Preston stepped forward, tipping his hat. Preston Hayes, madam. It's a pleasure to meet Hannah's sister. Catherine smiled, clearly approving of his courteous manner. The pleasure is mine, Mr. Hayes. Thank you for taking care of my sister when our family failed her. The simple acknowledgement of their family's shortcoming touched Hannah deeply. And where's my niece? Catherine asked, looking around eagerly. I've been dying to meet her. Emma's with Mrs. Gunderson at the ranch, Hannah explained. We thought the stage ride would be tiring enough without a squirming baby to manage too. Then let's not delay, Catherine said eagerly. I want to see everything your ranch, your home, my niece. The journey back to Cottonwood Creek was filled with conversation as the sisters began bridging the gap of their separation. Catherine shared news of their brothers' marriages, their parents' health, and her own work teaching at the local school following in Hannah's footsteps. She explained proudly. And how are things? At home? Hannah asked hesitantly. About me, I mean. Catherine's expression grew serious. Better than they were. Father still struggles, you know how rigid he can be, but Mother misses you terribly. Your letters about Emma, about Mr. Hayes, they've softened her heart considerably. Enough to come to the wedding? Hannah asked, trying to keep hope from her voice. Catherine squeezed her hand. Not yet, I'm afraid, but sending me, that's their way of extending an olive branch. A beginning. Hannah nodded, accepting this realistic assessment. I'm grateful for that much. When they arrived at the ranch, Emma immediately won her aunt's heart with her sunny disposition and ready smiles. Catherine, in turn, produced gifts from her bag, a handmade quilt from their mother, a small wooden horse carved by their father for Emma, and letters from both brothers expressing tentative congratulations on Hannah's upcoming marriage. They're trying, Catherine explained as Hannah traced the stitches on the quilt, in their own way. The week before the wedding passed quickly with Catherine's welcome presents. She threw herself into the remaining preparations, helping with final touches on Hannah's dress and creating simple decorations for the ceremony. She and Preston developed an easy rapport based on their shared affection for Hannah and Emma, with Catherine declaring her wholehearted approval of her sister's choice. He looks at you the way father still looks at mother after 30 years, she observed one evening as they prepared for bed in the cabin, where Catherine was staying until the wedding. Like you're the sun his world revolves around. Hannah smiled, happiness warming her from within. He's a good man, Cat, the best I've known. I can see that, Catherine agreed. She hesitated, then added quietly, I wish you'd written to me when you were in trouble. I would have come. Hannah sighed, regret flickering across her features. I was ashamed and afraid you'd be forbidden to help me. Perhaps, Catherine acknowledged, but I'm not a child anymore. I make my own choices now. She took Hannah's hand. Promise me something. No more secrets between us, no matter what happens. I promise, Hannah agreed, squeezing her sister's fingers. No more secrets. The wedding day dawned clear and crisp, the November sky a perfect blue over Cottonwood Creek. Hannah dressed in the main house with Catherine and Mrs. Gunderson's help, while Preston prepared at the bunkhouse with Miguel and Tomás. They had chosen to hold the ceremony beneath the largest cottonwood by the creek, now resplendent in autumn gold. Simple benches had been arranged in a semicircle, and an arch of woven branches marked the spot where they would exchange vows. Mrs. Thornton had brought several other women from Seligman, who had quietly supported Hannah not during her disgrace, perhaps, but after, through small kindnesses and messages passed through Mrs. Gunderson. As noon approached, Hannah stood at the edge of the clearing with Catherine beside her and Emma in her arms. Preston waited beneath the arch with Reverend Johnston, tall and straight in his best suit, his expression a mixture of nervousness and profound joy. "Ready," Catherine whispered, adjusting Hannah's simple veil. Hannah nodded, a sense of absolute certainty filling her heart. "More than ready." Miguel began playing a simple melody on his guitar, and Hannah walked slowly toward her future husband, Emma content in her arms. The faces that turned to watch her held nothing but happiness and approval, a stark contrast to the last time she had faced a gathering in Seligman. When she reached Preston, he took her free hand, his eyes never leaving her face. "You're beautiful," he said softly. Reverend Johnston smiled at them both, then at the small assembly. "Friends and family, we gather today to witness the union of two hearts that God has clearly brought together through His mysterious providence." The ceremony was simple and heartfelt. Preston's vows included not only his promises to Hannah, but a special pledge to Emma as well, vowing to love and cherish her as his own daughter always. Hannah, in turn, thanked Preston for offering shelter when she had nowhere else to turn, and for teaching her to trust and love again when she had thought both beyond her reach. When Reverend Johnston pronounced them husband and wife, Preston's kiss was gentle but filled with promise. The small crowd erupted in cheers, with Emma adding her own delighted squeals to the celebration. The wedding feast that followed was the most joyous gathering Cottonwood Creek had ever hosted. Tables were set up in the ranch yard, laden with food prepared by Mrs. Gunderson and the women from town. Miguel and two friends provided music, and as the afternoon progressed, dancing broke out on a wooden platform Preston had constructed for the occasion. As the sun began to set, casting long golden rays across the ranch, Preston found Hannah sitting on the porch of the main house, watching the celebration continue. "Happy Mrs. Hayes?" he asked, sitting beside her and taking her hand. The new name sent a thrill through Hannah. "Completely," she assured him, "though it may take some time to get used to being Mrs. Hayes instead of Miss Reid." "We have plenty of time," Preston said, his voice warm with promise. "A lifetime." Hannah leaned against his shoulder, contentment filling her heart. From her lowest moment standing alone with Emma outside the general store in Seligman to this perfect day, her journey had been one of unexpected blessings and second chances. The man beside her had offered shelter when she needed it most, and in doing so, had built not just a home for her and Emma, but a future filled with love and possibility. As twilight deepened over Cottonwood Creek Ranch, Hannah and Preston Hayes sat together watching stars appear above their land, their home, their family, a testament to the healing power of kindness offered without judgment, and love given without reservation. 5 years later, Hannah stood on the porch of the main house, watching the sunset paint the western sky in shades of gold and crimson. The ranch had prospered beyond their early hopes, with Preston's careful management and Hannah's practical support, creating a growing enterprise that was becoming known throughout the territory. Emma, now 6 and full of curiosity about everything, sat on the porch steps teaching her 3-year-old brother James to identify constellations as they appeared in the darkening sky. Beside them, 1-year-old Michael crawled determinedly after a grasshopper, his chubby legs propelling him across the smooth planks under his sister's watchful eye. The sound of hoofbeats drew Hannah's attention to the ranch road, where Preston appeared, returning from a day checking fence lines in the north pasture. Even after 5 years of marriage, the sight of him still quickened her heart, the straight-backed figure on horseback, the easy grace with which he handled his mount, the smile that warmed his features when he spotted his family waiting. "Papa." Emma called, abandoning her astronomy lesson to race across the yard. James followed more slowly, his shorter legs working hard to keep up with his sister. Preston dismounted in one fluid motion, catching Emma as she launched herself into his arms. "There's my girl," he said, swinging her around before setting her down to scoop up James. "And how's my cowboy? Been looking after your mama and brothers today?" James nodded solemnly. "I helped feed the chickens, all by myself." "That's my good man," Preston praised, setting the boy on his shoulders. With Emma skipping beside them, he crossed to the porch where Hannah waited with Michael now balanced on her hip. "Welcome home," she said softly as he leaned in to kiss her. "Best part of any day," Preston replied, his eyes conveying everything words couldn't express: his love for her, his pride in their family, his gratitude for the life they had built together. The years had brought changes to Cottonwood Creek Ranch. The original cabin where Hannah and Emma had first found refuge now served as a schoolhouse, where Hannah taught not only their children but several others from neighboring homesteads. The main house had expanded again to accommodate their growing family, with a separate office where Preston and Hannah managed the ranch business together. Relations with Hannah's family had gradually improved as well. Catherine visited regularly, bringing news from Pennsylvania and doting on her niece and nephews. Hannah's mother had finally made the journey west the previous year, spending a month at the ranch getting to know her grandchildren and witnessing firsthand the good life her daughter had built. Even Hannah's father had unbent enough to send formal letters and gifts for the children on their birthdays and at Christmas. Inside, the aroma of Mrs. Gunderson's beef stew filled the house. Though now in her 70s, she still came 3 days a week to cook and help with the children, becoming an honorary grandmother to the Hayes brood. Miguel and Tomás had stayed on as well, now joined by Miguel's 2 youngest sons as the ranch operations expanded. After the children were bathed and settled for the night, Emma with a new book Preston had brought from Flagstaff, James with his cherished wooden horse from his grandfather, and Michael sleeping soundly in his crib, Hannah and Preston retreated to the porch with coffee. "Heard from Sheriff Morris today," Preston said as they settled into the porch swing. "That business with the Cordova gang is finally settled. They're all in custody now." Hannah nodded, relieved. The outlaws had caused trouble throughout the territory last spring, rustling cattle and robbing stagecoaches. "That's good news. I've been worried about you riding the far pastures alone with them still at large." Preston squeezed her hand reassuringly. "No need to worry anymore. Territory's getting more civilized by the day," he chuckled. "Remember when Seligman was just a dusty street with a general store and a saloon? Now they've got a proper hotel and talk of the railroad coming through." "Progress," Hannah agreed, though with mixed feelings. The same civilization that brought schools and doctors also brought more rigid social structures and judgments. She sometimes wondered how different her experience might have been if Emma had been born 10 years later, in a more established Seligman. Preston, reading her thoughts as he often did, said quietly, "Some changes are good, others not so much, but whatever comes we face it together." Hannah leaned against his shoulder, taking comfort in his solid presence. "Together," she agreed. They sat in companionable silence, watching stars appear in the vast Arizona sky. The life they had built together at Cottonwood Creek was not without challenges: drought years that threatened the herd, illness that had once left James hovering between life and death for terrifying days, the ordinary disagreements that arose between 2 strong-willed people sharing a life and business. Yet through it all, the foundation Preston had laid with his first act of kindness, offering shelter when Hannah needed it most, had proven unshakable. "I've been thinking," Preston said eventually. Emma's getting old enough for more formal schooling than we can provide here. Might be time to consider building a proper schoolhouse in the valley. Could serve all the ranches within riding distance. Hannah sat up straighter, intrigued by the idea. You'd want me to teach? Preston nodded. If you'd like to. You miss it sometimes, I think. The teaching. The observation was accurate as usual. Though Hannah loved her life at Cottonwood Creek, there were times she missed the intellectual stimulation of a classroom filled with eager minds. I do, she admitted. But the children are growing up, Preston finished gently. And a school close enough that they could come home each day would be the best of both worlds. Hannah considered the proposal, excitement building within her. It would need proper funding, books, supplies. Details we can work out, Preston assured her. What do you think of the idea itself? Hannah turned to him, her eyes bright with possibilities. I think it's wonderful. A way to bring education to children who might otherwise go without, given how far we all are from town. Preston smiled, pleased by her enthusiasm. Then we'll make it happen, together. Later, as they prepared for bed, Hannah found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this moment. From the day she had stood alone and desperate outside the general store in Seligman, to now mistress of a prosperous ranch, mother to 3 beautiful children, wife to a man whose quiet strength and unwavering love had healed wounds she once thought permanent. What are you thinking about? Preston asked, coming to stand behind her at the bedroom window. His arms encircled her waist, drawing her back against his chest. About how life can change completely in the space of a single decision, Hannah replied. If you hadn't stopped that day in Seligman. Preston's arms tightened around her. But I did, and you were brave enough to trust a stranger when you had every reason not to. Hannah turned in his embrace to face him. Not just a stranger, she corrected softly, the best man I've ever known. Preston's kiss was tender, a reaffirmation of the bond between them that had grown stronger with each passing year. When they parted, his eyes held hers with the same warmth and respect that had first drawn her to him. I love you, Hannah Hayes, he said simply. And I love you, Preston Hayes, she replied, today and always. As moonlight spilled across their bed, illuminating the home and life they had built together, Hannah knew with absolute certainty that whatever challenges the future might hold, they would face them as they had faced everything else since that fateful day in Seligman together, with courage, faith, and an abiding love that had transformed a simple offer of shelter into the foundation for a lifetime of happiness. In the quiet moments before sleep claimed them, Hannah offered a silent prayer of gratitude for second chances, for unexpected kindness, and for the man beside her who had proven that sometimes the greatest acts of love begin with the simplest offerings, a safe haven when the world has turned its back, and the promise of a tomorrow better than yesterday.